Welcome to Life Support Live, the weekly live show that explores how Star Trek can help us to boldly go in our own lives to better ourselves and the rest of humanity.
As a famous starship captain once said, as another famous starship captain once said, wherever our mission takes us, we will try to have a little fun along the way.
Dr. Trek, does that captain like to ride horseback?
Yes, because it takes two to tango.
Hello, everyone. I am psychologist Dr. Ali Mattu.
And I'm Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek. One of us is a real doctor.
And both of us are wearing the color red in honor of Lunar New Year? I don't know. In honor of what?
Doomsday? That's...
Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to a special episode of Life Support Live. We don't do these too often, but when we do, we have a lot of fun. This is a Ask Us Anything episode where we're really going to be talking about whatever you all want to talk about today. It's going to be a lot of fun. But if folks are joining us for the first time, Larry, what is, can you tell us a little bit about Life Support Live?
Sure, now that I'm completely lit. Hey, Life Support Live, if you're new to us and you're just coming in for the first time, welcome. We do this every Saturday morning live, or most every Saturday morning about this time. We take a Trek topic, usually, that's derived from the most recent Fresh Trek, now that we have Fresh Trek, and we jump into it. Yes, we geek out, but we do it through a mental health, through a daily living lens, so... Dr. Ali provides that into things. I try to take you on a deep dive back into Star Trek's background and canon, which is what we do in Trekland the rest of the time. And we have a lot of fun. And we do it all with this great Lifers community that if you have not introduced yourself in the chat, you should say howdy and let everybody know where you're from. Otherwise, they will take over and just run everything.
I love how everyone is saying red alert, red alert. Larry, we've got, this is an Ask Us Anything show. So folks, ask us anything. We got our first question here from Charlotte. Do the docs coordinate their wardrobe before the show? Last week we had blue shirts. This week it's red. Please don't die, docs. Larry, we
red
don't.
Shift, blue shift. That's what it is. Yeah. It's an old game we play with light.
We don't coordinate our clothes at all. This is... Besides that one Halloween episode we did, season 1 of Life Support Live, we don't. This is just
wow.
chance.
I'd forgotten that. Yeah.
You wore
your.
I was
going to say we're doing Ask Us Anything today. We're doing an AUA today, only because this last episode of this mid-season finale of Prodigy was just such a poor episode that we couldn't derive anything of value from it. No, I'm kidding.
That was
great. But we talked about this. It just felt very plot basic. Like, I had a couple ideas. Some folks had ideas on the page. If you're not on our Facebook page, please go join. But, we just thought we'd do this today.
Yeah.
Otherwise, our theme could have been the psychology of wrapping up story threads in a mid-season finale, because that seemed to be what the whole show was, wrapping up threads.
Yeah, there was a few things that we're picking up on, but they didn't really seem like they had enough meat to it. And we also haven't done one of these in a long time, so we wanted to talk about this, or to talk about actually whatever you all want to talk about. Jared's got a question.
Since before his son burned hot in space. Yes.
Why is Star Trek afraid of audio commentaries, especially the on-screen talent? The ratio of hours of Trek to the amount of commentaries is next to nothing, and those commentaries that do exist are 90% behind-the-scenes personnel.
Well, that's the best people. Do you want to know how the show came together, or do you want to just hear actors blabbing again? Come on, what do you want? What do you want, Jared? No one put a business together of actors talking about. Oh well, I guess they did. Okay.
Well, this is something I was lamenting to a friend of mine about, Larry. Mm-hmm. Commentaries in general are, since physical media sales have sort of gone down and people are streaming more, it's harder and harder to come by new commentaries for new productions. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that because I'm a little they're one of my favorite things, um,
Hmm.
and nothing beats watching one of your favorite films with the director and other folks involved talking about how this came to be, the decisions they made, all of that kind of stuff, right?
Gosh, what an area to explore. More people ought to do that with their livelihoods.
I
Um,
know. Right? So
so no, here's a
is
mini.
this
No, seriously, a
disappearing,
mini K
Larry?
three. But there's okay. So is Jared and are you talking about why do we not have more commentaries
I think
basically,
Jared.
or
Well,
why do we not have more?
Jared's asking why aren't more cast involved. I'm afraid these things are
That was going to be
disappearing.
the other part of my rhetorical question before
Yes.
I answered, which was the big. If the I think something, a couple of things. Number one, the commentaries thing. It may feel like we've been doing it a million years, but it's still relatively new. I mean, just having creatives talk like on their Instagram accounts and things is relatively new, like just the last 4 or 5 years. But also this actors versus backstagers. And I hate to be crass here, but some of this is the exuberance of promoting your show. It's one thing to pop up it for 5 or 10 minutes, even online, especially, and talk and answer questions is one thing. But to sit down for a half hour or an hour of an actor's time in the exuberance to promote a new show or maybe even a new season, that's one thing. But if you're going to have an actor sit down over a long haul and do a lot of that, that's time.
Yeah.
And after the exuberance of, hey, come see our show, and you get into the second, third, fourth season, it turns into, okay, so how much are you paying me? And I don't want to make them sound crass, but it's again, it's not like a 5 or 10 minute interview. It's a half hour, it's an hour sitting down. And the other thing is they don't want to sound, I mean, I've heard some, especially actor interviews where it's kind of, I don't want to say it gets insipid, but it gets insipid. It's nothing deep. It's like everybody and if that's what you want to do is hear a couple of actors riffing and kidding around, that can be cool. But if you're listening to the commentary to get some new gleanings, sometimes you may be disappointed depending on what mood they were in that day. And if it was for an hour, it's going to be a one take wonder. So it's kind of like nobody's going to do a second take of an hour unless you get 5 minutes in and something totally blows up and you totally put in a snippet. So, I mean, that's just off the top of my head. They have to be produced. And then you're paying a producer anyway to do even another one. But I'm just going to say that after the new wears off and everybody's excitement dies down, after that, somebody says, somebody needs to pay me if I'm sitting here doing it now. And that's doing one. If you've got 6 regulars and you think you've got even 12 shows or 10 shows now, it might be more than one a piece. So
Yeah,
that's
I,
tough to get. Yeah.
I am inclined to agree with you, Larry. The cost of on screen talent appearing in any type of production is pretty high. I think you're probably going to get a better experience going to a convention and hearing them talk about the experience they want to share. And usually on screen talent, you see them more in interviews about side interviews that appear on that
Mhm.
DVD or Blu-ray or whatever it might be. So I think you're right.
It's not because it is a pressure of performance
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in a level. Yeah, you're talking about your home movies or something, but it still is you're on and you have to sound cogent and you have to sound interesting and not just, oh yeah, this is the day we all got up drunk and nobody could get through their makeup and I
Well,
mean,
and if you listen to some commentaries, some director commentaries, there are those periods where there's lulls and they're like, "Oh yeah, that was a really hard shot." Yeah. Okay, so moving on over here, we've got this scene. Let me tell you about this scene. And then 5 minutes later, it's like, oh yeah, this was a funny day because craft services never showed up, and so everyone is really hungry. And yeah, yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
yeah.
But talent, on-screen talent, cast members, they their livelihood is about performing. And so they can't have bad takes showing up. So I definitely get what you're saying there. Jared does have a follow up here. When the TNG Blu-ray sets were
Yes, you,
released,
Jared.
yeah, right there, the front row. When the TNG Blu-ray sets were released, there were less than 10 commentaries across 7 seasons. Larry, any thoughts
Are you
about?
talking about the 2002 or the 2008ish, 9ish? Yeah, I it's that's kind of it. I mean, what we just said. Yeah.
Yeah. We have our first mental health question here. Um, well, okay, so Nathaniel has two. He has a silly one and a serious one. Let's take the silly one
Mm.
first. Um,
Okay. I feel like Jen Psaki all of a sudden. Okay.
he said, "Are there any lessons to be learned from Spock's brain?"
Never let Gene Coon get away from the staff. That's what.
I thought you were gonna give a behind the scenes lesson there.
Never
Um,
hire Frank Freiberger to kill your show the third season. No.
I, your brain is the most important muscle in your body. There we go.
Ali,
Yeah.
brain and brain. What is brain?
What is brain? Brains are super important, Nathaniel. That's what I'll tell
That's
you.
the,
He had a more serious question, which I think is a fascinating one that we could
that
spend.
wasn't a serious question.
That was it. Yeah. uh, he's got one that we could spend hours talking about this character. Nathaniel says, more seriously, there's a lot of debate about how to interpret Ducat's breakdown in Waltz. Sign of a lifelong mental illness, dissociative event, artistic license by the writers, just a character divulging inner thoughts. So, Nathaniel, this is a great question. I think it speaks to something
We're
called
talking about the scenes of him having conversations with Cisco
yes,
in his
and
mind.
really
Yeah.
unraveling. So Nathaniel, I'm gonna take like a big picture response, and then I want to hear Larry's thoughts about this, and then I'll fill in any nooks and crannies that might be left there. So big picture, there's a model called the stress diathesis model of mental illness, and basically what it
Oh,
says is
SDM.
yeah, you're fast at the acronyms, Larry.
Well, it is psychology. I mean, come on. Yeah.
So basically, what it means is mental illness is often produced as a result of stressors going on in the person's life and vulnerabilities. Whether those vulnerabilities might be in the person's own background, their biology, all of that kind of stuff. Another way to think about it is you take the stressors, you add the vulnerabilities, and then all of that you kind of subtract strengths from it because everyone has strengths too that kind of buffer them from the impact of stress and vulnerabilities. And this is kind of the equation for whether or not someone might be experiencing a mental illness. When we see Ducat in Waltz, Larry, this is pretty much the lowest point he has been. No family. Zial, his one of his last like family members that was like speaking to him, she's been killed. He's been isolated from Cardassia. He's been captured. Um, Everything is gone. Everything is gone.
The pinnacle that he reclaimed to reach an even higher height has now crashed.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here he is facing doom, not only in the big picture but in the small picture too. They've crash landed. It's just him and Cisco, and I think his stress is so high here. His strengths have really disappeared. He does have a lot of vulnerabilities. I think from his personality. I don't think he's a guy who really he got by making a lot of big rationalizations that like this is good, that the occupation, this genocide is good for the Bajoran people. I'm doing stuff that's good for Cardassia.
My
All that's
children.
yeah, my
Yeah.
children. Yes, all of that stuff is now spitting him in the face, and he's facing imminent death here with Cisco. I think the unraveling we're seeing is that high level of massive stress that he is under. So I think Nathaniel, to answer your question, I think what's being exposed here is what happens to a person who's not really coping well, has lost everything, and is really at the highest level of stress someone can really be at. But Dr. Shrek, I turn to you. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I'm the fake doctor, but I have
I
a question
concur.
back. What it just occurred to me. We talk a lot these days, especially about someone who, and for lack of better terms, so excuse my laymanology here. My laymanology? Did I just make up a word?
You did?
Uh, Excuse that, but we talk a lot about people who are in cults
Yes.
of all kinds, and we used to have the classic, kind of vision of a like the Georgetown, self-suicide and all that kind of thing, the ultimate. But if you're part of the thing about a belief system, and I guess the spectrum winds up in a severe cult, is part of the problem when you're confronted with facts or proof that some of what you cling to is wrong because you're not in a functioning cognitive process. You're just so embraced with the cult that anything you get to a point where anything that's presented in evidence to contrast or to oppose what you're supposed to be believing, you just reject it. You find a rationalization, or it's just like shields are up and nothing can penetrate, right? But then sometimes something does penetrate, and the old tired image is, like if you have to keep up that wall of disbelief and clinging to your cult belief, because if you allow one crack or if you allow one thread, then the whole thing comes apart, and you've made yourself so brittle that it's not about letting some new information in and assimilating it. That process is gone. It's more like one, new info coming in is like a crack, and then all you can do is just shatter. And it feels like what you're saying about he's built up the lies, he's built up the self-delusion to the point where a lot of people can go an entire life and have people throw reality at them, and they are able to wall it off, and they live their whole life. But here's a case where he's crashed and burned. He's had his family taken away from him, his planet and his position, and now his begrudgingly accepted colleague that he always thought himself far superior to is the one in control of his destiny in his face. And now he's stuck with him, and he may die with him. So to me, this looks like Ducat's shattering here is, again, a rough layman's equivalent of shattering that tightly held persona or that tightly held belief system. I was saying cult loosely. You could be a one-person cult. I mean, but it's like what happens when you cannot deny the reality anymore. And it's like it's not even just about one crack. It's about 8 or 9 or 10, and he just shatters. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry if that's a horribly
No.
off,
I think you're. No, I think that's. You're right on here, and what you're speaking
because you
to.
lose the ability to like take new input. It's when
Yeah.
it gets to the point where,
Yeah, you're speaking to something that Galinda is mentioning here, which is that personality disorder has a hard time when their houses of cards fall in on them. And so,
yeah.
one of the differences with personality disorders, so personality disorders are these, it's a form of a mental illness that has to do with long-term patterns in how someone acts. And usually, personality disorders don't create a lot of day-to-day problems for the person that they might recognize themselves. So something like a narcissistic personality disorder is something where people might be creating problems for themselves, but they don't really realize it. And it most often affects other people. There are some personality disorders that aren't like that, like borderline personality disorder. People might be much more aware of how they are creating problems for themselves. Obsessive personality disorder is another example of one where it might mostly be creating problems for other people, and people don't recognize it. But Ducat's in his place where, yeah, his house of cards are falling in on himself, and he can't really rationalize his way around it anymore. And right at the end, Cisco's like putting his thumb in that wound and just pressing it. He
Fast assault.
yeah, I know. At first, he's sort of really concerned for his own welfare, and then at the end, Cisco's like, "The hell with this! Like, you want to know what I think? Let me tell you what I think." Uh, what an episode. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. I hope that kind of answers your question, Nathaniel. There's people had a few
Do you
comments.
think it's dramatized well, Ali? We talk about,
Oh,
as counseling, but as far as this issue,
yeah, I think Ducat is really dramatized well. That scene works for me, Larry, or that
I mean, the
episode.
breakdown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Waltz works for me really exceptionally well because we have so many other data points about Ducat that kind of point all in one direction.
Hmm.
The thing with a personality disorder is you need to see a lot of examples over a long period of time in a lot of situations to really pick it up. It's not something you just pick up with one sitting. And I think that's something that's so beautiful about how Ducat is
Hmm.
characterized on the screen. You're getting glimpses of it, episode, season by season by season. And then when you see Waltz, I don't think it's maybe it's shocking the very first time you see it. But once you see it, you're like, oh, there's there's been clues that this is what's going on behind the scenes for Ducat for a very long time. This is just what the version of it you see when everything around him falls apart and he has nowhere to go and nowhere to rationalize. I think it's very well depicted. What do you think, Larry?
It was entertaining, but then a lot of things are entertaining without, having the consultant in that field jump up and go, "This is horrible astronomy," or "This is horrible psychology," or "This is horrible," which we do tend to do here at times. But I was getting the idea that you were pretty much okay with the way his breakdown was depicted, because you've got to be literal and you've got to be visual about it. So
Yeah, one of the things that can put people at most risk for bringing harm to themselves um, is high stress, high what's called perturbation, which really just means is like you feel this energy to do something that you need to take action, high degree of hopelessness, high degree of self hate. When those things are very high, you see really you see this kind of behavior, and this is what we see out of Ducat: high energy, high stress. I've got nowhere to go. He's beginning to question things about himself, and he doesn't see a lot of paths forward. This is the kind of situation that puts people at very high risk. And all of those things are playing out in Waltz. Absolutely all of them. Libby says, I think Ducat was seriously mentally ill by the end of the series and possessed. I should say, having a paw wraith.
I was gonna say by paw race or otherwise, or by obsessive,
and
destructive thinking. Yeah.
and Melanie says, sorry, Ducat brought it all on himself. And yeah, I'm not saying he's not at fault. No,
Nope.
absolutely.
It was that fourth guy in the corner. That's who brought it on Ducat. No.
No, I mean he's absolutely he's guilty of a lot of things. He's guilty of genocide. He's guilty of a lot of deaths. He's really guilty of war crimes. He's guilty of so much stuff. I think the thing I'm trying to share here is as you unravel these things, you can find explanations for how people got there. It doesn't excuse their behavior, but we can understand what were the pieces that led them to their point. Larry, we had a good question here, kind of following up what
Good question.
on what we the first question here. Yeah, this is also from Nathaniel. Larry, since you did a commentary with Ira, what is the setup like? Two guys on a couch with drinks? How does it work, Larry?
I wish. No, I was smart enough to see. I'll tell you. Here's a K3 for you.
Mm.
Here's a
First
couple of
K3
K3s.
of the episode, folks.
Yeah, we said, because when we went to AMA or AUA, the American, Astrophysical Union or something.
Yeah.
No, I was like, well, I guess I won't do a K3 to a theme, but I'll just do mini K3s as they pop up. So the interesting thing about that, and heaven knows if we'll do this again or what the next, set will be. But all those commentaries are driven by the need to we got to put some new stuff on these discs because some people just don't care that we've made the video or the audio a little bit better. They want and they, bonus features. So I need to go back and track the years. But I did a sit down panel. I moderated a sit down panel for the Next Generation movies for one thing, for 4 times that we shot in about 2 hours total because they just made us go back to back to back to back, and our brains were fried by the end of it. But the thing with Ira was a case of wanting to do some new, commentaries, like Jarrod said, had been by the makers, and they felt like, which is silly, but they felt like, at least on the movie level, that the obvious makers had done commentaries, and they were looking for something new. Now, I think I could have found new makers to still go and do that. But they were saying, let's find some adjacent Trek people to come in and talk about this. So you saw Kurtzman and Orsi coming in and talking about Star Trek 4, or you saw, Ron and Brannon, Next Generation era people talk about original series bits. And I was saying, oh, I'd like to do one somewhere. And the irony is at that time, this is hard to believe, but this was like the mid-aughts. And there was still very much a feeling of all of Star Trek was depressed. Like, no, there was nothing new being made. And the old, and DS9 and was still, and Voyager were part of the era when ratings sunk and the fandom divided and nothing was as big as TNG was at its height. And then Enterprise was just like the sad little thing. I mean, that was the pervasive thing. And they're going back and retooling the original series movies and even the next gen movies, right? So this was all in service of those sets. And I said, I'll do one. And they were trying to get people from other places. I was supposed to do 2, actually. But at the time, Ira was keeping a low profile and just trying to move on with life and do, keep the paychecks coming and work. And it actually was a case of me having a slot to do a commentary and then saying, Larry, who is somebody from the franchise that you can bring in? And the first I was like, who never talks, we never see anymore, who is an amazing guy and should be talking? It's Ira. And they're like, will he do it for, whatever little thing we're going to throw at him? And I said, well, let me see. And I said, do you want to come in and talk about Star Trek, was it 6? You want to talk about Star Trek 6 for a commentary? He was like, sure. So we sit down, and first off, he starts off with he goes with this token cute podcasters, like audio only, no visual thing of, gosh, Larry, if I'd known I was supposed to wear my Star Trek uniform today, I would have brought mine too. And I'm just, okay, we're going to go there. Okay, Ira, fine. That was not planned. But then as Star Trek 6 unwound, I realized that they had used half of the cast, not Shatner, Nimoy, D. Kelly, but they had used all the supporting cast on DS9, like a ton of them. So that was but it's Ira just pulling his little mind between his factoids, and this is a guy I followed since he did those Cassavetes movies, those indies in the 60s. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I would throw my stuff in off the cuff, but, and him being, anyway, it was a great time. And so I'm like, yes, let's do that again with the next gen movies. And so I was originally supposed to do a commentary on Nemesis. I didn't, somebody else, Mark Altman or somebody got the good movies. So I was like last to the, so I got Nemesis, and I'm like, you know what though? We can make lemonade out of any lemon you throw at us. There's good stuff in Nemesis. And again, guys, we're talking about, this is before the podcast era. This is like pre-2010. All this thing about talking is still kind of a new thing to people. And so I thought, well, who else would be like a fish out of water? Who knows? Nick Meyer. And we haven't done a lot together, but we've done some, but not a whole lot. So I called Nick, and he's like, okay. And he's like, really? He didn't say Nemesis, really? I think it was kind of like, okay. But we get there, and I've got my memory with Ira. It's like whatever happens, it was just good stuff happened. If we got to a lull, something would bubble up. And Nick can be very dour at times. And we start off, and we're going through the credits, and he's either not saying anything or anything. The old saying about if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Well, he's not saying anything at all. about Nemesis.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it's not like, it's not like his life has revolved around talking about the Next Generation movies. So anyway, after a few minutes, it becomes one of the most painful thing. Not that Nick has suddenly gone, deaf mute on me or something, but it was like I was scraping to come up with the positives, and I don't mean just cherry vanilla positives. I mean, we would critique some things, but he would start to say something, and then it was like I could tell he was like, I'm going to clam up, or I'm going to say something they don't want me to say. I'd better be quiet, or they're not going to want this negativity. And he would say a little bit, well, what do you think about blah, blah? Yeah, yes, they went there on this attempt. Yeah, he would say
My
something that was
God.
so sad. Anyway, the more we went on, the more I was like stressing. I felt like I was like plastering this plastic smile on my face. And it's not like he was going to be very honest. He felt like he was trapped between being the honesty that he saw it as
Yeah,
and
yeah.
knowing that he couldn't just be as honest as he wanted to be. So I was filling in all these and I had, behind the scenes stories to throw in. I mean, we were there. I was there. But it was not the same experience. And when we got to the end, I've got the guy's his last name was King. Jeez. David, maybe. Anyway, we get to the end, and the producers, we get out of the booth because we're no sofa on either one, no drinks. We're just there with maybe water. I've got a picture of Ira and me anyway. I didn't get a picture of Nick and me doing it. So we get to the end, and I'm just looking at the booth staff, like, okay. And they've been the same people that did. So it's not like they knew that I was a horrible host moderator person. And they're like, okay. So about a week later, I get a phone call. And they say, well, Nick has asked us, Nick has really pleaded, asked us not to use that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, let's do another. Well, we're just going to get like 2 easy body pushovers. We're just going to get Jonathan and Marina to come in and do a track on Nemesis. And I'm like, oh, okay. So like, oh, no credit for. I don't get to do one for the Next Gen movies. And I wrote the book on Next Generation. So anyway, so somewhere out there is this track of Nick and I kind of painfully going through. So we're talking about commentaries, that's part of the, yeah. That may have been more than you wanted to hear, but
I did not know that story at all. I'm actually a little curious about
it's not the biggest, widest story I've ever told. Yeah.
I'm just a little curious about the literal production of it. Do you have headphones on that's giving you the audio to the film, and you have the mic?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes
we're
sense.
watching the film go by, and
Yeah.
we've got headphones on,
Yeah.
and we're talking.
Yeah, makes
And
sense.
it's muted too. It's not muted, but I mean it's down low so we can hear it.
Right.
Like when we do ours.
Yeah, like
it's
when we
down
do it.
low
Yeah.
so we can still talk.
Yeah. Well, that's your answer to the question.
I think I've told that story publicly maybe once, but it's not a big thing. But I'd love to get my hands on the audio track now and hear how bad, see if it's as painful as I remember it being.
Here's a question from Christoph. Question for Ali. Are counselors on starships a real thing currently? Okay, do we have starships yet? But say on real world ships with 1,000 or more people, like cruise ships, big Navy ships, up to aircraft carriers, maybe even a larger submarines. Yeah, so not every naval vessel has a counselor, therapist, psychologist on it. Some do. I have a friend who is a psychologist in the Navy. I should ask him what determines whether or not a ship has a counselor on it.
What's the title? Do you know? Is it counselor or is it?
It's not counselor. Yeah, it's usually
shrink. What?
they're usually psychologists or there might be a master's level therapist. I know in the Air Force the entry title or the entry rank is captain for them. Let me do some digging and see if I can find some more.
I mean, I know TV, but in the golden era, and you're depicting. Anyway, MASH had Sydney.
Yeah.
Weinberg? Yeah, who was not assigned to their MASH, but he was like the floating.
Yeah, well, that's
he called in
at a lot of at bases, you will have someone there, and they serve a wide population. Thinking about ships, I don't know what determines, and submarines, I don't know what determines whether they deploy a mental health professional on those ships or not. But they're definitely there, and it's tricky. I think I've mentioned this a long time ago on Life Support Live, but it's tricky because you're not only the mental health professional on the ship, but you're also serving with everyone there, and they're also your colleagues and your crew and your friends, and so
You have mentioned this, yeah.
yeah. So it gets complicated, like we see sometimes on Star Trek. Sometimes that's depicted well. Sometimes it's not so depicted well.
See, I was just going to say that I think Troy and Esri rise above that,
Oh yeah,
and now Culber on Discovery, they rise above that whole thing of we're colleagues and it's hard. I mean, if they need to be blunt, they feel like they can do, and they always dramatize the fact that all these cases, it's always the thing about, the chief medical officer. You hear about it, but the counselor too, they can jump in and recommend, or I don't know, does Troy have to like team up with Crusher to do it? But if they feel like relieving the captain or anybody else of duty,
Troy
they're
can.
entitled to it.
Yeah, Troy can and has pulled that card here and there, which is nice to see. One of the things.
So to me, that's either an improvement or just a whether it's an improvement over actual military situations today or it's a fantasy that they wish they could do or whatever. But that's the fact. Right.
I think the opinion of a mental health professional does weigh pretty heavily on a lot of military, in much of the military. In civilian life, one of the laws I do not like that exists in most of the United States is to admit someone into a hospital. You often need a physician's recommendation, and not a mental health professional's recommendation doesn't carry enough weight. And the challenge there is, in some situations, it's hard to get someone to sign off on that as well, especially in more rural areas. And so it's tricky, and it slows the process down. So I'd see that as an improvement on at least civilian life. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. I think we got that one. Here's one that has no answer, Larry, but warrants a discussion. This is coming from Andrew. I'm watching Elementary Dear Data. Philosophy question. Can a hologram have a soul? Just an easy question, Larry. An easy question.
Easy question.
I've got a thought on this. Do you have a thought on this, Larry?
It depends on its programming. Well, no, you get into this when it starts before this. The very first big holodeck episode in season 1. In season 1, in The Big Goodbye, you've got his cop friend McNary, is that right? He says, look, you're just, finally at the end of the thing, he says, look, you're just a hologram, and I'm going to go out to real life, and you're going to stay in here. And he's like, basically he's saying, am I the refrigerator light? He's saying, gosh, when you leave, do I cease to exist? And I was watching this show going, whoa, didn't see that coming, little existential question there. And then they get back into that with, Moriarty in Data. But then, I mean, in Minuet, they play with that all the way through. And then you even have, it's not a humanoid looking thing, but the whole thing of emergence and launching a life form from the holodeck. If it's sentient enough, does it have a soul? I mean, you can go there. But then, then you come all the way down to the Doctor being this highly programmed thing that takes on personality, and they warm it up. And then by the end of it, does he, they give him legal rights just the same way they would treat him as an AI, just the way they treated Data. And no, we're not repeating the plot. It's a whole different concept. So it's, what does he say? A hologram.
Yeah, can a hologram have
it's just a robotic hologram that's just a projection, then no. But if it's some kind of attempt at a fully fleshed out personality, then you're at least getting into the realm of thinking about it. But if you want to debate I'd almost say it'd have to be on a case by case basis, because I don't see.
Yeah, I think Dis-
mass manufacturing of emitted holograms. I don't know.
So there's what we think, and I think there's what canon shows us. The easy answer from canon comes from Star Trek Discovery, which seems to be yes. Well, not even no. Actually, TNG answers this question with
Right.
Moriarty. They do treat him with as having some type of self awareness. We see
Right.
this with the Doctor in Voyager as well, and then we see this in Discovery now with the ship's computer. So my personal answer is, look, we have no working definition of what a soul is, at least not one that's can be empirically tested. But if we were asking questions like, if we're drawing distinctions between animals and humans, one thing we can draw a distinction between is at least some degree of self awareness, ability to think, plan for the future, reflect on the past, things like that. If we're thinking about those kind of things and kind of matching them up to this idea of a soul, then I think when it comes to programs, and holograms are just projected programs, like you were saying, Larry, we will probably get to a point where it's very hard to tell the difference between um, someone or a program that might be programmed to act like it has self awareness and sentience versus one that doesn't. And then at that point, does it matter? We kind of have to treat them the same way, whether they're programmed to be this way or they're actually this way. We have to treat them like they are sentient. Um, if Moriarty has been trapped in the computer, unable to activate, and thinking that whole time, that is cruel. That is absolutely cruel, and we need to.
which is which is a bit. I'm trying to remember now the beginning of coming back with the Countess.
Yeah.
Doesn't does he make a comment about how he's been waiting for 3 years, four
Yes.
years, or does he feel like does it feel like, I mean, like he's physically been waiting for 4 years in the dark of non-existence, but with a consciousness, or does he come back on and realize the chronometer has passed
I
and
think he's been waiting. I think he's been
that's what?
waiting,
Yeah,
and he thought the captain was taking actions to help him get out of the holodeck. I think he did.
yeah, that's what I wanted to think, but I haven't. I'm doing this off the top of my head. I haven't thought about it
Yeah,
in a long
let
time.
us know if
Yeah,
we're wrong, folks.
I'll
But
look it up.
but I do think that he's aware of the time passing. Or actually, was he? Does he wake up and ask the computer how long it's been, and then he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's been this long"? I don't know, Larry. Now I'm doubting myself.
Well, now I'll look it up, and I'm sure somebody else. But I don't want to steer us off this too fast. But
Yeah.
Christoph is reminding me that I posted this on our page. If you're not on the Facebook page, you should go join. That I posted we were going to do an AMA, although it's an AUA. And there's actually some questions over here, and I don't know
Oh,
if
amazing.
everybody is reposting
Oh, let
their
me check.
questions over.
Let me check.
Christoph asked the thing about there's counselors on a real starship. Some of these have nothing to do with Star Trek, which I guess is okay. So I have Zahir saying, "How do you cope with virtual stage fright?"
Oh,
Um,
let's tackle that
Libby
one.
saying, "How do you fight the feeling of continue?" I'll just throw these out because you can't
What
see.
what 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 at a time? What at a
Oh,
time? Let's take Zahir's. Let's tackle that one.
well, I'm just going to tell you there's like 8 or 10 questions here from different people. So,
Yeah, I just pulled them up. This is amazing, folks.
oh,
We've
good.
we've
Oh,
got.
you have internet too. Okay. Like, I don't have to relay these to you like a.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll hop back and forth between the live questions and the
And the dead
and
questions.
and the questions from our post. Zahir's question: how do you cope with virtual stage fright? Zahir, the same way you cope with IRL stage fright. So in both situations, the fear is usually the fear of evaluation from other people. So I would ask you, what is it that you're afraid might happen? And so maybe you're afraid you might say something stupid, or you might freeze up, or you might not know what to say. And then the question becomes, how can you get some practice with that fear? it doesn't matter. It usually doesn't matter if it's online or offline. Usually it comes back to some kind of fear of being evaluated. So helping you to get contact with that, helping you to learn how to cope with that, all of that kind of stuff. If you're looking for something specific, you can practice. What I would say is practice making contact with that fear in a small way. So if you're in some kind of group Zoom kind of environment, the first thing you can do is you can comment on what someone else has already said. So like if Larry said something, I could just say like, "Oh, that's a great idea, Larry." Then the next thing you can do is voluntarily raise your hand and share something. And then the next thing you can do is share some kind of personal experience, a little bit of a story that usually is a little bit harder for people. Those kind of things should help you get a little bit more comfortable with that uncomfortable situation. Hope that helps.
And apparently was reactivated accidentally by Barkley, of all people. And he asks,
Right.
how long have I been out? It's kind of like
Right.
Khan coming to.
Right.
Barkley says, how long have I been gone? They say 4 years. Or how long has it been since I was last turned on? He says 4 years. And he says, wow, it seems like longer than that.
So there's some awareness and also not.
They
Okay,
dodged
interesting.
it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
They both they did both.
We call it, the technical word for this is hedging. Yeah.
Oh man, good question.
While you're looking there, David Francoeur
Yeah,
maybe is a new person with us today.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
been with us before, but not in a long time. And I see Steve Price. Feels like Tuesday's live here where I'm telling the new people hi, but don't let me insult you if you've been with us before. But I've seen a couple of new names so far in the chat, so yay.
Yeah,
Glad you're joining.
wonderful to see you all. Phil's got a fun question here. Transitioning from Souls and fear of public speaking to TOS. If TOS went for a 4th season, do you think it would have been a further push into the realm of Lost in Space to be more of a kids show? Season 3 seemed to be headed that way. What do you think about that one, Larry?
That's good. Usually people are debating this about like Enterprise. Well, they had a couple of ideas. Part of that, if they actually made it to a 4th year, I wonder if Gene would have come back and taken reins back because they'd seen it. Part of the dynamic of feeling like a kid's show was that when Paramount bought Desilu, they were always going over budget. So to retaliate, Paramount kept chopping their budget, which meant that they were still going over. It's like, you're running over your budget here, so we're going to make you stop doing that by, it's like bad parenting. It's totally counterproductive. So they were still always over their budgets, but they started off being cheap. So cut the sets, cut the guest stars, cut the quality of guest star, churn through the writing, don't rewrite as often. But a 4th season, they had talked about having William Campbell come in and be just the same way they were talking about having Shran and Jeff Combs be part of the cast or really recurring more. They were talking about having William Campbell and Koloth recur more often, and having a running Klingon captain that he always kept butting heads with.
Oh,
kind of like Cisco and Ducat, I guess. That was one of the ideas I'd seen, and they were trying to build up. Maybe we would have seen a hologram holodeck, which is what he wanted to do. It's written up at the time. They make it happen in the animated series, but maybe they would have found a way to have that thing. Although in the beginning it was all about having your home planet recreated so you wouldn't be so homesick, space sick, homesick. It was meant to be a therapeutic tool, recreational therapeutic tool in a way, to take your mind off being out in lonely space, which is what the holodeck was. And boy, was it. But it really started off this innocent thing of, like you see in the animated series where the big thing is we're going to make some planetscapes so you feel like you're back on Earth or wherever you're from. So that might have been a thing. But I just wonder in the big picture if it actually survived the bubble twice, if Gene would have come back and said, okay, now can we get a decent time slot? And I'll run the show. But
I think that's a good answer.
Did I catch you? Yeah.
No,
I don't know where
that's
we're.
more than I could say. Libby's got a question from going from the
Well,
post.
good thing I showed up today, huh? Okay.
Libby's got a question, and I noticed Libby has a coffee logo next to her name on Facebook. That's pretty
Oh,
cool.
I see. Yeah.
I don't know what that means. What the coffee logo means? Maybe it means it was a recent. I don't know. Libby's question is: how do you fight the feeling of continuing isolation when you are high risk and still can't get out that much? Boy, Libby, this is a hard time, right? You know,
Still.
the people who are high risk and people who haven't been able to get vaccinated, like my daughter, who is still too young, and people who are high risk, and my cousin. My cousin is an adult and has been vaccinated with Pfizer, and her blood still shows no antibodies because she's gone through chemo and her body has not
Mm.
produced any antibodies as a result of these vaccines. So she, even though has been vaccinated, the vaccine didn't have any impact on her because she is high risk and she's immune compromised. So, for people who are high risk and for people who have children who can't be vaccinated, um, this pandemic is still a very different and dangerous
Which
situation.
includes you, right?
What's
Or
that?
is I said which includes you,
Yes. And as,
think?
yeah, because my daughter, she's unvaccinated. So
Hmm.
here's the thing: is all this talk about just like return to normal, all of that. It's people who are at high risk cannot do that because of the amount of this virus that is still floating around out there. It's not like the flu yet. We won't get to an endemic point until the rates are down to a degree where one person who is COVID positive um, isn't infecting as many people as there are right now. So it's so Libby, this is a very long way of me saying I get it. Now, what does that mean? What to do? You have to prioritize your health. You have to make a decision that's right for you. The one thing I think that's very hopeful about some of the research that's come out over the last few years, Larry, is
Hmm.
it's perceived connection, perceived social contact, and perceived loneliness that are important, not actual. And what that means,
So this has
yes,
been a lifesaver, a godsend. Yeah.
yes,
Even though it
if
doesn't feel 100% the same as
yes,
seeing people, it's far better
yes,
than nothing. Yeah.
feeling like you're connected to people, whether it's online, text, social distancing, is just as important as actual being next to people and near people. That's been one of the really interesting things to come out of the research on the pandemic is it's about perceived connection and perceived loneliness, not actual. And it works the other way too. We were kind of talking the other day about or the other episode about living in a city and being surrounded by millions of people. You're not actually lonely. Like there's millions of people around you, but it's easy to feel lonely because there's so many people around you and you might not know these people. So it's about
Hmm.
how you perceive things. So this is a long way of saying Libby continuing to find ways of staying in contact with people that feel safe for you, whether that's this, whether it's something else. That's the way to get through this until we're at a point where the pandemic is not as roaring as it is right now. And the other thing to say to that, Larry, is be patient with people who are not as comfortable as you are, because for some of them, even if they've had vaccines, they might be still at high risk, like my cousin who has no antibodies. There is actually um, there's a new treatment where you can have it's this medication. I forget if it's oral or injection, but it will produce antibodies in people who are immune compromised. But it's very hard to come by. It's very rare and very hard to come by right
Mm.
now. So, it's a tough time to be immune compromised.
That's amazing that it even exists. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm blanking on the name of it, but it exists, but it's very hard to come by.
Mm.
Let's see. Let's see.
Are you
Let's make
bopping
an.
back and forth? Our live thread, I know, is hey. So I didn't know if you saw this.
Yeah.
Michael Graves said at 10:26 on today. This is amazing. Okay, on the current thread, said yesterday was National Wear Red Day to help raise
Right.
awareness for heart disease. So he figured we were just being heart health aware.
I mean, it's not a bad thing to
Not
be
nearly
aware
that
of.
coordinated, Michael, but thanks for the idea.
It wasn't. I have a lot of heart disease on my dad's side, Larry. It's something I'm concerned about for myself. My doctor is always talking to me about lowering my cholesterol and being genetically high for cholesterol. So that is an issue that's near and dear to my heart, quite literally speaking. So more awareness for that, folks. Go get your blood check. Go get your labs checked. On a regular
Mhm.
basis. Um, we had a question here about Nathaniel brought up a big conversation here. Why hasn't Star Trek dealt with infidelity? And Nathaniel had some follow up questions regarding infidelity between main cast members.
Mm-hmm.
Um, hmm.
Wow. Because everything is perfect in the 23rd and 24th century from Earth. What do you mean? Surely, and don't call me Shirley.
I was
Surely
just
there.
about to make that joke, Larry.
Oh, sorry, I took your whole shtick away. Um, I'm
You
just
know,
thinking.
I
Surely,
might
in
speak
haven't.
softly, but I do carry a big shtick.
But you don't speak softly. So,
That's true, I don't.
for
I
a psychologist,
sing softly.
you did. No, you don't. Um, I sing softly in the morning. I sing softly in the night. I don't know. Forget that.
It's good. I like that.
I love Paris when it sizzles. Oh, wait, that's another song. Okay. That was strange. Strange interlude. Wait, that's another one. No, I'm just thinking that, it's amazing that as people complain about, like my friend Dave Rossi, people complain about, you can't do a modern series without having everybody be broken. We had this conversation
Yeah, we had this
and that
one.
imprecise bad lay term. But I'm just thinking the more we have troubled characters with issues being the dominant characters, it is kind of amazing we haven't had that. Hopefully dealt with in a serious way,
Yeah.
you know, as far as the relationships and the feelings and emotions involved. I'm just,
Yeah,
I can't,
I
maybe
know.
somebody's got an idea for that, but I don't think of
Yeah,
one right off.
I think about Battlestar Galactica and how it tried to unravel um, romantic relationships. It featured more polyamory. It featured more stuff happening. Um, more combinations, a bit more idic when it comes to relationships, and
A bit more Denobulan or Andorian.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, 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 yes.
Hmm.
Maybe Denobians are the closest we get here, but we don't. It's a good question.
That's a cultural thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good question. We should see more permutations of relationships. Why hasn't Star Trek given us that? I don't know. Um,
Like I
and
said, I'm amazed that nobody in Discovery has gone that route. Or,
yeah. We've got Justin, who is just jumping in, has asked us a few
well,
great.
let him in then.
Justin's got a few great questions here. Hello, Justin. Let me bring your question up here. Um, Justin had a couple good questions here. Happy Saturday, all. Dr. Ali, that's me. If you could create a medical doctor in the Star Trek universe, what era? What are they an expert in? Whoa. Follow up question for Larry. Larry Nemecek, that's you. If you could create a Star Trek show that focuses on a medical field, who would be the star? All right, Larry, you think about that while I answer Justin's first question. His first question: if you could create a medical doctor in the Star Trek universe, what era and what are they an expert in? This is a really cool question. I think it would be really interesting.
For which there is no
Um,
answer. No.
I mean, the easy answer is a pediatrician aboard Star Trek Prodigy. I think that would be that kind of fits with a lot of the stuff we have going on right now.
You're the EMP, the emergency no, the EPH, the emergency pediology hologram. Yeah.
So Justin, I would like to see a Klingon doctor um, after the augment virus has been released in the Klingon Empire. And I want to see this person
Hmm.
tracing down what's happening in much the same way as a pandemic spreads. I want to basically see the Klingon Dr. Fauci of the augment era trying to get a handle on this virus as it's breaking loose, and I want to see how it's impacting all the different Klingon clans. And I want to see the from a canon perspective. I want to see the connective tissue from Star Trek Discovery's Klingons to what we see later. And I think the augment virus would have a lot to say about that. And I also think it would be really interesting to see this kind of virologist at play in the starship or in the Klingon world, especially given that Klingons traditionally don't really value medicine as much. So I think there would be a lot of really interesting political tension. We'd understand more about the
Ooh.
Klingon culture, all that stuff. So
And we can do all kinds of parallels between our culture and the Klingon. Although,
a little social commentary could go a long way.
yes, still I can see but I think the way you just raced through that, though, you were talking about you wanted to see the augment virus's effect and explaining the Discovery Klingons versus later, but you know that Archer and the augment virus and the augments and all of that was 100 years before. It was shot 15 years early, 20 years earlier, but or what? Huh?
I want to see more explanation, or more. Not explanation, more
Just
exploration.
go there, use that,
Yes.
use those building blocks to explain it.
Yes, I want to see more of the clans, and I think there's connective tissue here.
We call them houses, Ollie.
The houses. I want to see those houses explored. I think there's a lot of things that can be explained in a really fun way. Why at some points do we see a lot of houses and at some points we don't? And then there's this one very dominant culture of Klingons in the TNG and post era. So like, what happened? And I think a virus, I think a pandemic exploding, I think all this stuff could sort of explain it and give us a little social commentary.
Yeah.
Justin says, wonderful answer. Would definitely watch that show. Let's start the Kickstarter right now. Hopefully CBS won't stop us.
Yeah. Forget Kickstarters. You need an agent to go in and pitch to the real people. They're
just giving away Star Trek shows at this point. Maybe they'll green light.
Come on, Ollie. Not 2000. What, you time travel back to 2002? What is this? No.
Now, Larry, your answer to Justin's question: if you could create a Star Trek show that focuses on the medical field, who would be the star?
Well, I could cheat on this and combine this with something else, because I've always wanted to see a God, you did such a good job with that answer. I think I would even want to see that show.
I made it up. It's a fake.
It's a fake. Well, one thing I think is interesting, I hadn't thought of that as the angle, because it has an obvious angle, but you could tack this on in a big way. But people are all agog now over Pike and the early Enterprise and all of that. But I've said for a long time, I wanted to see a launch of the Constitution class. I wanted to see the launch of the Enterprise with Robert April and his wife Sarah April, who was said to be the first. The NX-01 is going out and Phlox is there, and they're going into deep space. But the Enterprise in that era was supposed to be the next leap forward, just like the NX-01 Enterprise was a leap forward over the early, warp ships even. And they talk about Sarah being the first doctor aboard a starship. Maybe they mean starship class, meaning the Enterprise's era. But I would like to see pioneering. I mean, you see a little bit about that with Phlox, but it really kind of became more of the here's the thing of the week, and there wasn't a lot of like continuity. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
It was kind of like Phlox just got to be the doctor who had to be the hero doctor because he's the lead doctor and the only doctor on the show, and the ship is going new places, so the doctor is along for the ride. And it didn't feel like there was a point of view. The way Cerritos on Lower Decks for all the haha is supposed to be a second contact ship, and that's their Uber mission, and that's everybody's charge, and they all kind of know where they are in the hierarchy of Starfleet, and if they want to move on up, they are. But a lot of people are content to be there. So I would like to see a show designed with we're going to show the Enterprise's early days and have it be a little more primitive than what we see with Pike, even with Kirk. But also, you could take the standpoint of it's not just boldly going and commander airing and shooting phasers and stuff and talking your way out of crises, but it's like, how does that apply to medicine and engineering and all the other things, learning and accumulating knowledge, sciencing? But how does that affect when you go to a quantum level above a new plateau above the level you were at? What does that mean? And I think there's a line in not Time Trap, that animated show with the Aprils, where Sarah says something about I had to develop, tools and procedures that nobody had to think of before. But still, it's on a level beyond Phlox. So maybe that, and at the same time, we get the launch of the Enterprise too.
You kind
I don't know.
of you kind of answered. Libby had this question last night, or actually a few hours ago. What would be a Star Trek series and or
Oh yeah.
topic you'd like to
Oh no,
see,
I could go.
Larry?
I
Yeah.
was tied down by medicine here. No, I've said for a billion years I want to see a Romulan War
Hmm.
founding of the Federation definitive series. For God's sake, can we finally do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I would like to see a midpoint. I'd like to see a mid Archer to Kirk era show, and I'd like to see a mid Kirk to Picard era show.
Well,
It doesn't have to
give it a
be on
year, and that
Enterprise.
show will probably be greenlit. I think at this point.
Yeah, we're gonna get. But
Um,
I, and I'm not in love with them because I feel like we've seen a lot of them. But I mean, like, I've talked about doing a federal. Somebody else online said this, and I said, "Oh, you mean like for years I've said let's have a Star Trek West Wing," and they were kind of like thrown that I put it
yeah.
in those terms. But yeah,
I,
because you could be Earth based with it, but you could go any week. You could go back to a member world, to a new place, to a crisis
yeah.
situation, but you could have the excuse of mixing everybody just like it might as well be like a space station was like DS9 was the crossroads, or Babylon 5 was the
Our last
crossroads, and you
great
had people
hope
in
for
conflict. But
peace.
what better way to have it at the council chambers or whatever on Earth?
Yeah.
And you
Um.
could, and you could
Just
still do Starfleet missions and do things like that too with people.
you can just watch The Expanse while you're waiting for that show. Larry, that might be the closest you get to it. Zahir asks, which Star Trek film, episode, or series would you like to see reimagined by Quentin Tarantino? So Zahir, I know Quentin Tarantino was there. There was rumors going around about his involvement or him pitching a script. I don't know if we're ever going to get to see that project. I had a
Well, they
very
weren't rumors; they were real. They
yeah.
really had a guy signed writing a script. But yeah, now whether it, yeah,
Right. And what's happening with that next Star Trek movie? Who knows? I know he's a big fan. I have a very hard time imagining what a Quentin Tarantino Star Trek film would look
I
like.
I don't. I can totally see what it would look like.
Well, can you?
No, I mean, cursing and blood and hard cuts. It would be, uh, pounding. I mean, just go back to watch one. Now, I think he would tone it. I think there'd be a little bit of pullback from the excesses of some of his stylistic things in his other movies. But yeah, but it would go there. It would be the push. It would be the most envelope pushing.
I don't.
So I would hope the plot would be something that was shocking or violent. So it felt, I don't want to get
So
up. You know,
I think there's two eras that he would have to go to. One is the original series, um, You need to see like gore in action or something like that. Um, or Dominion War. Um, and I actually think what he should do, if anything, he should do some type of Dominion War story that seemingly glorifies violence, but really by the end of it, it's speaking to the horrors of war. And like Kill Bill, Kill Bill is it's it's uh it's violent, it's intense, it's a little bit of his love letter to to that genre, but at the end it's also a bit about the futility of revenge. It's he kind of made his own Wrath of Khan in a way. um I could see him doing something similar with war, and through the Dominion War. I could see him doing something like that. um and I think it would be really interesting to watch that movie and people are like, yeah, yeah, cheering on. And then by the end, it's really about, oh, no, 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 no. This is horrible. What you were cheering on. This is not something we should be
The
glorifying.
weight and the damage come home to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's a good question. They're all good questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, coming from Libby. Also, these are this thread has such good questions in it, Larry. For both, how could a television series or a series of series come to mean so much to so many, bring so many people together, including people in this group? Where would we be during these times without Star Trek? What should we say to those who tell Star Trek fans to grow up when we obviously are? Ooh, getting deep with my question. Yes, you are, Libby. Big picture question here is, how can a television series mean so much to so many? Easy question, Larry.
Yeah. Well, I like the end of your last question, Libby, saying, "What do we say to people who still tell Star Trek fans to grow up?"
Take that one.
I thankfully think that we've come. I think the geek revolution that Star Trek helped initiate, along with the tech wave, everything, media, all of that. But the Comic-Con culture that I have gone on at length about how it started with the 50th anniversary of the first Star Trek, the big Star Trek convention was just a couple weeks ago. And nobody marked it. I said this on Tuesday's Live. There was no big 50. I think somebody finally found some article somewhere, maybe in Germany or something. There was no big marking of the 50th anniversary of the first New York Con. I was kind of in shock when I realized it. So I tried a couple days later. But I think that this is less prevalent, far less prevalent now, because Star Trek tried to kind of kickstarted the geek revolution now. And now everybody goes, oh, I can, the most crass people say, oh, I can make a buck off this. So it's acceptable in a capitalist society. So this whole thing about grow up and get a life, that was so 80s and 90s. And today has gone away. I guess it still does. So yeah, if nothing else, grow up. You say, I am growing up. I'm going to go. I'm getting this degree so I can emulate all the people who are serving lives through Star Trek and science fiction. If they're really crash, you can say, I'm going to go out and make a million like X, Y, and Z have done in the entertainment, event fields or whatever. Here's five companies I want to emulate, whether it's Creation or it's Reed Pop or it's the company that does the theme cruises. What is CPM? I forget. Anyway, that's kind of my like go-to answer anymore is, when you see the chambers of commerce and tourism convention bureaus who are clamoring after people to bring a convention to our town and we'll get that hotel and restaurant tax money. Again, that's a very baseline thing. But as far as how could a TV series come to mean so much to so many? Well, it's like get back to it's adventuresome, world building, and uplifting and respectful.
The relation
in a desert of a society culture that doesn't have a lot of that. So.
Yeah, I think everything Larry said, I'll plus one that. The relationships we have with fictional characters are just as important as the relationships we have with real characters, with real people, I mean. And they're called parasocial.
Some of them are real characters. I'll tell you what. Some of them are.
Yeah, that's true. Um, the relationships are important. These ideas are important. The ideas that we can, the original ideas of Star Trek, of IDIC, of diversity, of our strength is in our differences, that we will improve and get better. I think that was an incredibly hopeful message in the 1960s, when the world really seemed at the brink of so much war and conflict and upheaval. Here was Star Trek with a optimistic vision of like, we're gonna get better, and we're gonna get better by working together, and that, I think that's still inspirational for so many of us. So what do I say to people who say grow up? I mean, it's kind of the same thing I would say is like why? I mean, look, you in a couple of weeks,
Define grow up.
yeah, in a couple of weeks, so many Americans are going to be dressing up like two different football teams and cheering along the sport. And, people love The Bachelor on ABC, and people love this and that. People love all, don't yuck my yum. Let people love what they love and enjoy it. And
Don't
as
yuck
long as
my
it's
yum.
not, as long as it's not harming you, who cares? Let people love
I
what
haven't
they
heard
want
"Don't
to do.
Yuck My Yum" since I read it 8 years ago. That's funny. Okay.
Something I tell my daughter all the time. She's like, Daddy, why are you eating that? I'm like, because it tastes good. She's like, not to me. I think it tastes blah. And I'm like, don't yuck my young, sweetie. I can enjoy this. You enjoy your pirate's booty because you eat that all the time. And I think that is just not yummy. Um,
Yeah.
Everyone enjoy their own thing. Um, we had another question. This is from Karen. Karen Hinckley. When does being independent become toxic? That you feel you don't need to take care of yourself, even when you can't. Um, like not wanting to talk to your family and friends about health issues or money issues because you feel like they will ignore you, judge you. Um, how do you get past that independence and get help if you need it? It's really hard to ask for help when you need it. When does it become a problem? It becomes a problem when it starts to get in the way of things. If for example, it's producing a lot of guilt that's making you hard for you to live your life. If you actually need help, but you're feeling a lot of anxiety or something else, and that's getting in the way of asking for that help. If if your feeling of needing to do it on your own is getting in the way of your life and making it hard for you to live your life, that's when it's becoming a problem. And what do you do to get unstuck? It's really about trying to understand, what are your concerns? Is it guilt? Is it anger? Is it anxiety? And try to
Shame.
address those. Shame, yeah, that's a big one. Try to address those first before asking for help, because those things have to be overcome. Um, for me, like I grew up not really caring or having any interest in understanding any money or budget related stuff. So for a long time in my marriage, I would just avoid those topics because I would get so anxious around them because I felt like I didn't know much about money. And then I had to talk to my wife about the anxiety and stress I had around money before I was able to even get help and say like, okay, I need help how to figure out this kind of stuff. So you got to deal with those emotions first. Larry, any thoughts on that? About when does too much independence, when is it a problem?
Yeah. Well, hi, Karen. Hope I see you in June. Uh, yeah, it looks like two things. Part of it is internal, like getting through, like what you just said, but also part of it is maybe also the people who should be your normal support group, your family, your friends, either because of something within them or it's what you're projecting out. And it's not the people that you're closest to aren't, like you need neutral people. And I know we live in this wonderful society that fulfills all of our health needs of all kinds, not, but um, trying to find to me, part of this is dealing with your own stuff, but some of that, if it's not totally self-directed, if there's any way to access, I mean, there's a lot of trust to do this, to have it not be so flimsy or flip, but if there's any way to access any kind of, even the most basic, just sounding board counseling, without feeling like you're giving the game away. I mean, and if mental health technically isn't part of an insurance plan or whatever, hopefully there's some nonprofits or somewhere where you can talk to somebody on a, I'm not talking about like a suicide prevention hotline or something, but which is a good thing. But I mean, if there's some kind of some kind of a low cost thing, just to talk about some generalities with somebody, just to get some kind of bearing to lay the groundwork for what Ali is saying. Like, that's the thing to do, but how do you physically, practically get there? And if you had somebody in your life you just personally go to, that would be great. And if that doesn't exist and you have to go to a stranger, hopefully a trusted stranger that's got some cred, hopefully not just some volunteer but I'm saying it's like trying to access resources in some way, whatever the shape, form, fashion, where you are, if you're in a desert or you're in a good spot for that kind of service. That's as much of a challenge sometimes, even when you know what you ought to do, but then finding the help if the people that ought to be helping you aren't helpful.
Well said.
Okay.
Larry, the last one from Facebook is for you.
Not bad for a fake doctor, huh? Okay.
This one comes from Steve Price, who says, okay, for Larry, when did the idea or concept of a fixed continuity or canon first come into being for Star Trek? Was it when Star Trek transitioned into animation, or was it with the movies? Just curious.
It was there from the beginning, because science fiction wasn't taken seriously, or the perception was that science fiction on screen was not taken seriously, and you only had one-off movies like Day the Earth Stood Still or Forbidden Planet, or you had Twilight Zone as an anthology series, and The Outer Limits as a lesser extent. But nobody had ever done recurring, regular characters in a science fiction setting before, unless you count, like Captain Video and all the 50s-ish, like really bad, basically trying to be an update of Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, whatever. And then you got, it's modern in color and everything's Lost in Space. And people used to, I don't know if it's faded, and now we've got the Lost in Space reboot, which is a much better product than the original namesake, because people for years, especially Star Trek fans, loved to make fun of Lost in Space as the token bad sci-fi show. So Gene was all about, he wanted to talk about issues. He was going to use science fiction to get them past the censors, but he had to make it serious in the minds of the audience, not serious as in no humor, but it couldn't be Lost in Space. No one was going to listen to his issue preaching if they didn't take the show seriously. And part of taking the show seriously, set it 300 years in the future, was making sure you didn't do dumb something. It didn't shift from week to week. One week on the bridge, this console was weapons, and the next week it was the ice cream dispenser. I mean, like, you couldn't do that. So they early on were writing memos. The network yelled at him for spending so much on the pilots, for getting, military input on how the consoles might look, and getting consultants to talk about, call it a phaser, not a laser, and don't go to Sirius. That's not going to be a star that's going to have life-bearing planets potentially. Go to, or just make up a name. Don't go to a known star if you can. I mean, that kind of advice took time. He did that in. Some of it was more costly than others by the time you made a show. But from day one, he didn't want to throw junk science out there, but he also knew that just on a subtextual, subliminal level, to take the show seriously, to preach what he wanted to preach, you had to have the characters be consistent, and you couldn't go Lost in Space. And to the point that they did that so much in their prep documents that the writer's guide, became this, underground bestseller, and that a guy could do a book about the making of Star Trek that half of the world bought it to see how TV was made, but the other 2/3 of the world bought it because it explained everything about the show and the layout and the ship and the technology and all that. That's the byproduct of the original thing. So yeah, you can go back and read Making a Star Trek and read all the memos back, and some of them are tongue in cheek. But what do all the other names on Vulcan look like, or what should the other classes of what are the other ship names in the class, look like? And it goes back to day one. So all the people that are laughing about canon and all this, they also knew, like in third season when nobody cared, when in the trial, Turnabout Intruder, it's the last damn show ever aired. The show's canceled, but when the director just had Shatner or somebody like, okay, just leave the room, exit off over there, and everybody in the scene is going, there's only one door, it's over here, and the director's like, what are you people crazy? Just go off over there. And they're like, okay, but we're going to get letters, and they did, that kind of thing. Or when Scotty would do the levers, the director told somebody he wanted the levers this way, not that way, and Jimmy is arguing that no, you beam up this way and you beam down that way.
Yeah. Yep.
The sliders.
Yep.
But it's baked in the cake. It's DNA. That's why people laughing today or arguing about it today, I'm like, it's kind of like the whole, Star Trek is a political thing. Also, Star Trek isn't concerned with its canon. I'm like, I'm sorry, do you watch the show? Do you read the
Yeah.
Do you read the thing?
That's a good answer. I think everyone was not expecting that, and I think that's a great answer, Larry.
Like expecting what?
That. I think that's a thorough and a very satisfying answer.
Oh, but surprising? Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
not
I'm being
surprising.
presumptuous. To me, I'm thinking, well, everybody knows that, but that's like, duh. This is why we do
This
shows
is
and
why
podcasts
we
there.
have the questions. No, especially coming out of. So you had Twilight Zone, which was huge, but Twilight Zone's an anthology series where there doesn't need to be any consistent timeline. And then you had stuff like Lost in Space, which was fun time for the family, but also wasn't sophisticated or a drama and did not have that level of continuity that that a drama would expect. So elevating
mean,
Star Trek to that.
Past 8-year-olds playing Robot and Will on the playground at recess. Beyond that, nobody cared.
Yeah. So it makes a lot of sense that Gene would want Star Trek to be something that is more of an elevated experience here. Okay, Larry, we got about 10 minutes left. There's a bunch of questions here. Let's do a little lightning round here.
Okay, I promise.
And let's try to answer these questions quickly. Libby asks, Dr. Ali, when Ducat was receiving treatment for his background, is it realistic that they didn't catch maybe he should remain as a patient? He was getting treatment, Larry? I don't remember that.
Now that you say that, did they have him?
Oh, at Starfleet? So
like he went into custody when they retook the station.
Yeah. I would say so I think culture is a big part here. I think Starfleet is woefully unprepared to support someone like Ducat. Now, conversely, what's the quality of Cardassian psychiatric care? I don't know. But I do not think
Is it better than Klingon psychiatric care?
I don't think anyone was really well positioned to be able to help help him here. Okay, Jason asks a question. What are some psychological motivations behind why fans of a property choose to collect or preserve tangible objects or non-tangible historical information related to their fandom? And how is it that the Star Trek universe is different from other fandoms in this regard at all? I don't think Star Trek is different from other fandoms in this regard at all. Go to any convention and the exhibit hall and you will see. Why do people do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons why. One is that desire for connection to something that feels connected to the series. That's often why we might spend a lot of money on autographs or on things that were worn by or touched by other people who are involved in making of the show. When something is touched by someone or worn by someone, it starts to feel different in our head. It starts to feel a bit more like an extension of that person, and by buying that thing, you are now connected to that person in some way. I have a little somewhere. Where is it? Right there. You can't see it because it's clear. Right there. Right there. It's right there.
Oh yeah, I
That's
see.
my that's my one print from film print from the original series. It was unused film from a recording. It's of Leonard Nimoy as Spock there, and that makes me feel definitely connected to the production of the original series in some way. Having that, sometimes it's to be able to dress up and play and have fun as if you're taking on that role. And sometimes it's just it can be more about completion and collecting and trying to get all of these things or make all the things the right way. It can be a lot of different stuff. But big answer to your question is it's connection to this thing that you love. Rose asks, how do you cope with episodes of Star Trek constantly reminding you of your loved ones that are gone? That's a tough situation, Rose. I would say reflect on those thoughts and emotions as they come up if you feel comfortable doing so. And if that's too much and too overwhelming, maybe avoid those episodes for now until you're feeling like you can hold on to those feelings.
And I bet, by the way, Ducat was treated by Federation doctors and declared recovered, and that's when he's being transferred by Cisco.
Yeah, I really feel like Starfleet Medical would not have any idea how to support Cardassian rehabilitation of a personality disorder and all that. No. Sorry, Starfleet, you're not going to cut it. Melanie said, I like the latest episode of Star Trek Prodigy, but you could say it was predictable. I do like the character development. Rock is smart. Yeah, I think we agree.
I think I was gratified because I was hoping it was going to be this way, but the minute that the little Cation girl, small girl, got so much screen time, like 5 seconds, 8 seconds in the pilot, it was like, that's not just an accident. That's going to be and then the longer it went on, and then when she popped up again in part 1 of the mid-season finale, I was like, aha, they are going to come back to her. And then they come back to her, but not you still don't know the name. So that's kind of like, talk about continuity and threads there. I love Aaron Waltke. I'm going to try to do an interview with him in some way, but he's been all over social, and he just did an interview with Anthony on Trek Movie, and he went through he's citing all the canon threading that they're doing behind the most basic questions people are asking about the show. Like, oh yes, and here's the 12, 15 points we considered when we went here. Like the look of the Tellarite doctor on the Dauntless. Sorry guys, spoilers if this is anything. Anyway, it's the look of the consoles on the Dauntless. It's not a fake ship after all. I mean, it's really
I don't know what to
gratifying.
make of that yet. I don't know what to make of that.
I know.
Yeah, that kind of left me thinking. I paused and I'm like, really? Okay.
What, having the Dauntless look like the fake Dauntless from
Yeah,
15 years
I have nothing but questions about all of that. Charlotte asks, how's the squirrel, Ali? Still full of rage? I haven't seen the squirrel in a couple of weeks. Squirrel's been maybe in a different neighborhood here. Jarrod was mentioning, we were talking about way early on, Larry, we were talking about commentaries from cast members. And Jarrod said the 7th rule exists as an actor commentary on DS9 and Trek. Their GoFundMe Kickstarter more than tripled their target. The market is there. The interest is there. I think what's different there is those actors really want to explore and talk about it. And
you know what? We were talking about that, let me put a distinction between actors in an active show and actors who are out of that series, and I will say it, who are retired or semi-retired.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different. It's like going to a signing show in a con versus I can't. I've got to
Yeah.
go audition for no part. It's the same. It's not knocking anybody. It's where they are in life. So yay, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good distinction there, Larry. Jared also asks, "Are there any lessons from?" Oh, we already covered it. Oh, yeah. No, He's answering the question. Are there any lessons to be learned from Spock's brain? Answer: every series has its sub Rosa.
That's sad because Sub Rosa was Jerry Taylor's love of Gothic. Before she tried to put Janeway, in the Jane Eyre
Right,
mode, she
right.
was doing that with Crusher, and they just never, for some reason, work.
The horrible Scottish accent. What does that person say? Um, he says something, and it's just so
I
ridiculous.
kinda do it, Captain. What are
I
you? That's
know he doesn't say that. He says something. I don't
you mean
know.
another horrible Scottish accent person?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Charlotte asks,
or
"Isn't the brain mostly flat? It's very curved in on itself. So the brain is really big, and if you flattened it out, it'd take up a lot of space. But the way it's able to fit inside our skulls is it folds in on itself
oh
many different times. So it's a way for us to squeeze in a lot into a very small amount of space. So I hope that answers that
oh,
question. Yeah.
so it's not like bulbous
No, it's really
lobes.
if you ever examine a brain, which I don't know if you would have many opportunities to do that,
If
but
I ever see a brain,
yeah,
la-da-da-da-da.
if you take
Yeah.
your hands and you kind of make the shape. This is kind of the shape of half of our brain, and
Hmm.
this part kind of folds in, and these parts kind of fold in on themselves. It's
Uh,
it's it's a way to
so
pack in.
it's like you could unwrap it. It's almost like somebody took a piece of paper, wrapping paper, and just kept.
Kind of, yeah.
So,
I
so
wouldn't.
there's a lot more surface area.
Yeah, there's a lot of surface area. There's a lot of surface area because it's
Huh?
it's it's wrapped in on itself. I wouldn't recommend unwrapping your brain. You might not like the consequences. Glinda asks, from James Lipton's list, what's your favorite swear word? Larry, I'll let you take this one first.
Oh God.
You don't have to say it if you don't want to be explicit, but you can hint at it. Let's say.
Well, I'm not a big F word user, but I think adult. I always preach to my kids though. It's like, okay, I'm not going to tell you not to curse, but just don't abuse it. Like save it so it has some power when you really
Sure.
want to.
Yeah.
And people that just leak it all the time, it's meaningless. But my dad's cuss word was the S word,
Mm,
and it was kind of the model. It was kind of like he didn't curse a lot,
yeah.
but it's like when something was really really bad, it was like, well, something. Um, but yeah, I'm not an illustrious cursor, so I'll
Okay.
just go with the F and the S words
Yeah.
in spare
Classics.
doses. Yeah,
Classics. So
the classic.
I'll say that there is some
I feel
research
like we're
that
on a bus having a conversation crossing the Golden Gate Bridge. Ah, the classics. Okay.
yeah, right. I wonder what movie that's from. I will say that there is some research that swearing can have some pain relieving properties. So it's not all bad. I really like frack. I really 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 like frack. It's so satisfying to say. I think it's more satisfying than the other F word. And I also love that not everyone knows what I'm saying when I say it. Um,
See,
William,
I always feel like I'm being patronizing to Battlestar and a show that I didn't live like Star Trek. So Star Trek needs its
Star
curse
Trek
word
needs
there.
its swear word. Yeah, yeah,
Needs
yeah.
its frack. Yeah.
In the 24th century, no one will ever swear until you get to Star Trek Discovery. So, William asks, "Hey, LA, when did you start watching Star Trek? Star Trek 6? You can listen to our commentary on Star Trek 6 to hear that full story. But from there,
Speaking of commentaries, yeah.
yeah. Charlotte asks, "Is that an actual go-to coffee cup or one of those ceramic coffee cups made to look like a to-go cup?" This is an actual to-go cup, Charlotte. I stopped by one of my favorite bagel places this morning. Got some, the closest to what I found, New York bagels. Remind me of my old home. And they just so happen to have our good
Mm.
old-fashioned New York style takeout cups, and
None of those fake bagel coffee cup takeout mugs.
not
No,
one of those
it's
ceramic one. No, this is the real deal, and it reminds me of my old home, so that's why I got it here. Scott asks, since actors aren't necessarily fans and they very often see
say
things
people.
as their job or work, I don't think they're always the sources of commentary. Okay, this is more of a comment than question, but he's kind of agreeing with what you were
Mhm,
saying here.
mhm.
Larry, we got Jason asking, will there be a Larry and Ollie musical at an upcoming convention? um,
My manager is working on the terms, but it could be controversial, so we'll see. No,
we should do
yeah, ha.
a late night improv musical.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We should do that. Yeah, we
Kyr-
should come. Yeah, we should get the lifers to give us a greatest hits list, and then
yeah.
we work. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure Jared's on it. Cairo asks, there are a lot of actors who do not want to watch themselves. That said, the Delta Flyers is good because Robbie talks about director's choices and production insights, and Garrett is a sci-fi fan who always likes to watch himself. Delta Flyers are great. Yeah, definitely
Yes,
check them out.
and Connor and Dominic are going to start an
Oh,
enterprise
cool.
district. They're following that. You know, it pioneered with Garrett and Aaron, and then became Aaron and Sirach, and then Robbie and Garrett picked up on that and did it. I mean, now it's a thing. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Charlotte asks, question for Ali, how do we deal with the guilt on top of grief when we've had to help a pet crossover? Everyone keeps telling me I did the right thing by letting my Lita go, but I can't shake the feeling that I should have done more or waited longer because I don't think she was ready to go. Talk to
Mm.
people about it. Talk to people about the guilt you have. Find a way to share more and more of that guilt. That's what's going to help you to be able to explore that and get some more context and meaning around it. Rose asks, question for you, Larry. Do you think that medical technology in Star Trek series will ever come to be in real life? Some of it already has.
A lot of it already has. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. You can say it's orange fabric on a mattress and a blinky light above it, but it was radical when McCoy put people on a bed and let it. They used to say that in the '60s. I don't have to poke and prod and take samples. You're just scanned, and that seems so radical, and that's a lot of where we are today. And it changes every 5-6 years. It's constantly changing. So
Yeah, we've
yes, yes,
also
yes.
seen it's possible. It's not always the best, but you can receive some medication now without an injection. Um, so hypospray kind of tech is out there. People are working on medical like tricorders. Larry, like the touchless thermometer that is so ubiquitous in our pandemic world, it's Star Trekian kind of technology. If you think about it, it's kind of like a medical. You're holding it above someone's forehead, and you're getting a temperature. That sounds like a medical tricorder to me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Sounds like a scanner to me.
sounds like a scanner.
It was dawning on me the day I had something. Oh, I was trying to keep an old pen, an ink pen alive, and I was actually like trying to shake the ink down into the tip just to see if I could still keep doing it. And I was like, this is what we used to do with mercury thermometers, like this.
Oh
And
yeah.
I thought, wow. And then I'm thinking that's historic now, and we're gonna have a
Yeah.
whole generation that has no idea what you
No.
do.
No.
You see a nurse do this in an old hospital movie, they won't have any idea what's happening. And then I thought, wow, that's a skill that I could teach. It's like someday there will be like people that still teach people how to shoe horses and be a telegrapher. Someday, coaching historical period medical shows how to shake down a thermometer to actors who have no idea what that was like. That's a thing. And then I went, why have you spent 10 seconds of this in your brain? So anyway, yes, we're trying to wrap up.
We've got a few more fun ones, Larry, and then we'll
Oh, I see. Charlotte said something here at 10:47 about instead of drunk history, a drunk Star Trek.
yeah.
There was a young woman about 2 or 3 years before pandemic at Vegas, and I actually did an interview with her, and then I never posted it. But she was doing a podcast called Drunk Star Trek, exactly
Oh,
what you're saying.
cool.
Yeah. Now I don't think it blew up. I don't. It's probably out there somewhere findable, but just to say.
Larry, we got a couple of last fun ones. So Justin
Promise?
Yeah,
No,
I promise. Justin said, "Love your connection of coffee and bagels to home, Dr. Ali. What connection to home do you enjoy, Larry Nemecek? What takes you back to Oklahoma, Larry?"
this sounds very trite, and I started to say when I can find good barbecue, which is rare. I mean, you see a lot of, middling barbecue,
Yeah.
but there was a barbecue place we used to go to, which unfortunately went out with the pandemic. But when they brought something I grew up with and didn't care about, but then I did as an adult finally, and then now it's a thing to home, is they had good okra. They had good fried okra,
Mm.
and that kind of took me back. Um, I don't know. Yeah, that's one thing I can think off the top of my head.
Let's give our last question to Justin as well. And he asked this to me, but I'm going to ask to both of us. If you could be the mirror version of a character in Star Trek, who would they be? Do you mean mirror universe, or you mean what character kind of mirrors us?
Certainly, he means capital MU, mirror
It
universe.
must mean mirror universe. So if you could be the mirror version of a character, a mirror universe version of a prime character, um, Justin, help us. Yes, he says mirror universe. Okay, who would I want to be in the mirror universe? Definitely not
Yeah,
Smiley.
the MU.
Definitely not Smiley.
Definitely not Smiley.
I
Well, you know
would.
where my mind goes to? It's like I don't want to ruin a prime hero, so I'm going to think of somebody's mirror universe. I'm going to think of a villain that
Yeah.
maybe will be good in
Um.
the.
We never see him, but I guess I would like to be maybe a mirror Geordie. I think a mirror Geordie would be a lot of fun. Um,
That's an interesting choice.
yeah, I wonder if mirror Geordie like lasers come out of his eyes or something. I don't know. I don't know.
What are you, 8 years old, drawing in your notebook? What are you?
I'm thinking here. Glenn says Mirror Universe Harry Mudd. That might be a good one for you, Larry. I think that would be fun. And Charlotte
Yeah,
says
I like.
Brunt is nice in the Mirror Universe.
Yeah,
That's true.
this is the track I'm
Yeah.
trying to go down. Yeah,
How about Mirror Khan? I think I'll let you pick yourself. Go ahead.
Mirror Khan would be interesting. I was about to say Mirror Shran.
Oh,
Um,
would he be good or?
because Shran's kind of what's the gaming grid from the chaotic neutral.
Oh,
I
sure.
don't know.
Yeah. The Dungeons and Dragons character creation. Yeah.
Do chaotic neutrals basically they're the same in both? Are they both are they the same in both universes? Um, wow. I'm riffing like I'm trying to riff through all the shows and get into the. Oh, I want to be the Mirror Commodore O.
All right. And
I don't know.
with that, we got.
Oh my God!
We have our
that
lovely.
we end. Wow.
We have our lovely music going on. Larry, what do you got going on in Trekland this week?
Well, we're just doing our hey everybody. If you have not done so, please like and subscribe over at my YouTube. If you're not there right now, it would be great. I got into the numbers game late, and I haven't had an industrial add joiners to YouTube. But if you are around LA, I know this is regional. The last live convention I was at before Vegas and the couple in the fall was Gallifrey, which is a big HooCon in LA every year. And even though it's a HooCon, there's other things going on, and it's just down the road. And I'm going to be there President's Day weekend. What is that? The 18th, 19th, 20th, something like that. 19th, 20th. I'll be there that Friday. But otherwise, we're just kind of taking a breath before we gear up for spring events across Trekland. Just love everybody to join me on Tuesdays if you can. And the Trek Files will be back next week with our 8th season. David Livingston's going to be our guest next
I was going to ask for a sneak preview of what you got coming up there. Let's see, folks. I'm the same old times have been busy, so I don't have much cooking, but you can always check out my YouTube channel, The Psych Show on YouTube, where I try to make mental health more fun and easy to understand. I'm at Ali Mattu on social. Next week, Larry, we have a return to live action, and there's going to be a lot of it.
No more of that dead action for us. Oh, no.
We got Star Trek Discovery. We have Star Trek Picard. We have Star Trek Strange New Worlds. There's a lot coming, and so
I think we may have a future topic wherein you try to do therapy for those who are disappointed by by Strange New Worlds. I think the hopes of the entire civilized Star Trek universe rest on Strange New Worlds.
Let's set our expectations.
Placed or misplaced. Yes.
People just love that crew, love that ship. It'll be fun. No matter what, we will have a little fun along the way, Larry.
Along the way.
Yeah, so we'll be back next week. And who knows what we'll be talking about, but we know we'll be talking about Star Trek. We know we'll be talking about mental health, and we'll have fun. Until then, my friends, live long and prosper.
Absolutely. Trek well, everybody.